Grace does not only take appropriate care of her children, but also of the foes she faces. We will cover her kit and how to maximize her damage potential, her best disk drive sets and stats, her weapons, her teams and her talents, and have a look at her pros and cons. Welcome, I am Ravenous and let's talk about Grace Howard. Grace is an electric anomaly agent who specializes in quickly applying electric anomaly, repeatedly triggering shock, and excels at what she does in her role in either shock or even disorder teams, consistently yielding a high damage output while having multiple teams available regardless if you are a whale or free to play. With 119 base attack, she is ranked 6th among all current characters, and even though that is 12% less than Alan, that doesn't matter too much because she boasts a massive 116 anomaly proficiency, only being contested by Piper, and 120 anomaly mastery, the highest in the game. That being said, let's start covering her kit. Grace's basic attacks feature a 4-hit basic attack combo with the 3rd hit dealing electric damage. Her basic attack string can also not be interrupted or reset by her own movement, dodges or specials, which makes it incredibly easy to maintain a high damage output and electric anomaly application, while also taking care of dodging incoming attacks. Her special throws a grenade, and surprisingly with Grace you will actually use the non-enhanced version as well, with the enhanced version throwing 2 grenades instead, both inflicting good damage with massive electric anomaly application. As a ranged unit, Grace does not have a defensive assist and hence can also not parry, but instead she features the evasive assist, triggering vital view and allowing for her assist follow-up instead when switched in for a perfect assist, dealing high amounts of electric damage and daze. Regarding her dodge counter, dash attack, ultimate and chain attack, they all deal damage and have honestly nothing special to them, and hence there's no reason to cover them in depth. If they are available, use them. Instead, I would much prefer to actually cover her core skill and backtrack a bit to her basic attacks, because there has been a little bit of misinformation going around that apparently only spamming her special is the best way to play her, which in my opinion is actually not the case. When her basic or dash attacks deal physical damage, she accumulates 1 stack of zap. If you have 8 stacks, casting her special or EX special will consume all of these stacks and increase the electric anomaly buildup caused by said special or EX special by 65%. What this means is simple. By not using her basic attacks, not only do you miss out on valuable energy and decibel, because special attacks do not generate any energy at all in this game, but you also will not make use of her core skill whatsoever, as Grace's entire damage is basically backloaded into triggering the shock anomaly. Not making use of her basics is kind of horrible advice in my opinion. Instead, what we want to do is we want to weave her normal special and EX specials into her basic attack string. But we will cover that a little bit later on in the team and rotation sections. Last but not least, having another electric or Bellabog agent in the squad activates her additional ability, and every time you use your EX special, the following shock effect triggered increases the damage dealt by shock by 18%, stacking up to twice and resetting when the shock debuffs ends. The wording on this ability is actually horrendously easy to misunderstand, at least in my opinion, so let me explain. The way shock works is, while an enemy is affected by shock, up to once every second attacking said enemy will trigger the shock effect, dealing additional electric damage. Shock is hence technically not a DOT or damage over time effect which passively deals damage, but it must actively be triggered. So that is what it means for her additional ability. The following shock effect triggered part refers to a single proc of shock. This means we also want to make sure we kinda have enough energy and EX specials ready when the enemy is afflicted by shock to make the best use out of her additional ability as well. However, it is not the most important part. That all being said, let's talk about her skill priority, or at least as far as we can. We also actually have to look at 2 graphs, a disorder team for the graphic on the left and a mono electric team on the right. The actual damage distribution will vary team by team, but it gives a nice overview for the purpose of the section. That being, regardless of which one you look at, an extremely large portion of Grace's damage comes from the anomalies, be it either shock or disorder or even both. Since Attribute Infliction does not actually scale with skill level, but with gear and stats instead, her highest skill priority is actually on her gear and stats, and in regards to her skill priority, that would be her core skill, which also provides Anomaly Mastery, which in turn massively increases her application even further. This also means her skill priority is core skill into ultimate into basics and special into assist and dodge. However, none of these will elevate your damage output to the next level, which makes Grace an extremely resource-friendly unit as you can mostly focus on her gear. Weapons are also part of the gear, so let's have a look at them. Her signature Fusion Compiler is, surprise, her best on slot and is not rivaled by any other S-rank W engine. That is because, well, there are no other S-rank anomaly weapons, but at least we do have a few A-rank options. Both Rainforest and Lip Gloss are relatively similar in performance, however you will need them at phase 5 to be somewhat competitive with her signature, while still losing out on a little bit of damage. Their R1 versions are honestly her only other valid choices, but both of them are also not the greatest if not at phase 5. I would highly discourage you from using Piper's weapon, roaring right on her, as the weapon, excuse my language, sucks balls. Well, it does not if you have it on Piper, but it does if you have it on Grace. It is realistically nearly impossible to have a good uptime on its buff with Grace, making it an especially very inconsistent choice. For her disc drives, a 4-piece Thunder and a 2-piece Freedom is her best set combination, not only for the damage provided, but also for its ease of use and consistency. Going for a 2-piece Hormone or 2-piece Puffer instead of Freedom is another valid choice, albeit just slightly worse. Going for a 4-piece Puffer Electro with either a 2-piece Thunder or 2-piece Freedom are another possibility if you want to save on resources and farm more generic sets instead of specialized ones. And while this is probably a really good way on saving resources, especially if you are free to play, it not only results in quite a little bit less damage, but also requires you to use Grace's ultimate at all times, which can also lower your team's overall DPS output depending on the team you play her in. Because anomalies cannot actually crit, Grace is further easier to build as you are mainly looking for attack percent, anomaly proficiency and anomaly mastery. For slot 4, this means Anomaly Proficiency is her best choice, but if you have an attack percent main stat, you can use that one until you get an Anomaly Proficiency one. Slot 5, we want mainly pen ratio, but try to get the best stat you have available based on the priority graphic shown on screen. For slot 6, attack percent is the best choice if you play her as a main DPS in a Disorder team, which I personally would discourage you from doing so, with Anomaly Mastery being about even in a mono electric team with, for example, Anton. The main reason here being the insane amount of additional build-up she already gains from her core skill, which makes attack percent coming out ahead by quite a bit. For her substats, prioritize mostly Anomaly Proficiency and attack percent, and lastly flat, pen and flat attack. Crit values are only okayish and far behind the other options due to, well, anomalies not being able to crit. If you play her in a mono-electric team, however, crit values take a little bit more priority over flat attack. For her Mindscape Cinemas, her C2 is an incredible choice, as having free access to not only Electric Res Shred, but also Electric Anomaly build-up makes the Cinema stand out above the others. If played in a Disorder team, her C2 does lose a little bit of values, because, well, now we don't have 3 electric units anymore, but it is still a really good cinema to get. However, please do not cash for that, she is a standard character. Her C6 looks honestly pretty bad on She tier, which is because my calculations rely 100% on her being the only anomaly contributor, which skews the data for the damage gain from the cinema. By that I mean if you play her in a mono-electric team, and you actually have more and multiple contributors, Grace actually gains a lot more damage from this, as shown on screen right now. But that depends heavily on how you play and is hence not a really reliable statistic to use or show here. So let's have a look at her team. Grace pairs exceptionally well with other Bellowbog or electric units, not only for additional ability but also for disorder. Grace Arena is the classic OG example of a medium disorder team, bringing a stunner to the field in exchange for less disorders, as Collider's fire attribution is actually not the best. So what do you do if you don't have Rena? Well, Lucy takes a good spot in that team as well, being a strong generic buffer and helping a little bit with off-field damage and fire application for slightly more disorders, but overall less damage due to missing out on Rina's buffs, namely her pen ratio and shock buffs. If you don't have Lucy but Piper, Grace, Collider, Piper make for another strong disorder team, iterating between Assault and Shock. However, you will miss out on Piper's additional ability. If you do have Lucy and Piper but are missing out on Collider, you can play Grace with Piper and Lucy instead. For mono-electric teams, Grace pairs really well with Anton and Anby or Anton and Rina, which makes this team relatively free to play accessible, providing a good amount of electric application, while Anby can provide daze and Anton taking on the role of the main DPS here, repeatedly proccing his additional ability on Grace's Shock Anomaly. If you don't have any of the previously mentioned agents, well, except for Grace and Anby, because Anby is free, and why would you watch this video if you don't have Grace? Nicole can also fill the third slot as a support. So here are just some of the teams I could think of. If I forgot some, please feel free to comment them. Please note these are not in order, and I have marked the teams I personally think are the best. That said, let's look at Grace rotation, or at least as far as that is possible in ZZZ. Use her chain attack whenever available, and depending on your team you can either use her ultimate whenever ready, in case if she is your main DPS or you really just need that shock application, or you don't do that and preserve the ult for your main DPS, for example if played with Anton. In a Grace Collider team composition, using Collider's ult instead, for example, can be, depending on the situation, the correct play, namely if you need additional days to stun the enemy, while also being able to proc burn and disorder at the same time. Regardless of her being either your main DPS or secondary DPS, you want to weave your basic attacks on specials. As already established, use your chain and ult whenever available. If played in a mono-electric team with Anton, again, you can prefer to use the ult on Anton instead, which results in overall a little bit more damage. Use dodge counters whenever you can. That aside, Grace is not a burst-oriented agent and hence builds more on a smaller combo, which you can repeat over and over again until the enemy is shocked, at which point you can either swap into your main DPS, for example Anton, your secondary anomaly unit, for example Piper, or you can also just continue with Grace, or swap to your stunner if the enemy is not stunned. However, personally I would not prefer to stay on Grace, simply because again, triggering shock multiple times does not increase the damage, it only refreshes the duration. Regardless, Grace's main combo to make most use out of her kit would be basics 1, 2, 3 into her special into basic 4 into special. If you have an EX special ready, you press it, if not, you press it anyway because it's the special. This can be done in multiple quick swapper rotations, for example Grace, basic 1, 2, 3 special, basic 4 special, then you switch to Piper, use her special and switch back to Grace. Again, this is just a very simplified example. ZZZ is actually a very difficult game to actually give rotations for, since you will always be required to either dodge or parry, which automatically swaps out your current on-field unit. But giving you smaller combos, for example this one, to use might help you in understanding the kit a little bit better, as well as giving you a guideline to follow. That all said, to finish up this video, let's talk about her pros and cons. And since I already mentioned it earlier, let's start with some pros. Because Grace is an anomaly unit, and as established earlier, she is quite resource friendly, which is honestly super good for free-to-play players. She also has quite a few teams you can play her in, and she is super mobile without losing too much damage, which makes her pretty accessible for all kind of players as well. Because she is super flexible with short combos or just being able to honestly just press her special at least once in a while, she can easily be played as a secondary DPS or alongside another DPS without taking up too much field time, which is also how I would personally recommend her to play. However, all of her movements also reposition her quite a bit. Her specials especially give her quite the backdraft, which can easily lead to her being out of position or in an unfavorable position. Spamming her shock applications over and over again does not increase the damage, it will deal but only refresh its duration, as I already said, and hence she is best played in a disorder team or as a secondary DPS taking the field once in a while. And last but not least, her best support is Rina, which is yet another S rank. That all being said, thank you so much for watching, please leave a like if you like this video, let me know what you think of Grace and her playstyle in the comments, join the Discord if you haven't yet, and have a great day. Peace.